All right, if you're still with us or you just joined us, you're still on to Enterprise Television, and this is Enterprise Weekend. Let's get to our main conversation. Nigerians have condemned the arraignment of miners who participated in the hashtag End Bad Governance protest held from August 1 to August 10, aimed at addressing economic hardship and poor governance.
Very true. The protests demand lower governance costs, reinstatement of petrol subsidies, food security, and physical discipline. Some demonstrations turned violent with incidents of looting and vandalism leading to arrests.
On Friday, several arrested protesters, mostly miners, appeared in a federal high court in Abuja. During proceedings, 4 miners collapsed, showing signs of mistreatment and sparking widespread outrage. Former Senator Shehu Sani labeled the miners' as arraignment unfortunate and shameful. For Nigeria's democracy, urging the government to drop the charges and return the children to their states.
And human rights lawyer Festus Ogun condemned the proceeding as a gross violation of the children's rights. The Take It Back movement, an NGO, decried the government's actions as oppressive, calling for the immediate release of the malnourished and fainting miners.
Similarly, Enough is Enough Nigeria, a civil society group, demanded the release of the miners, calling their detainment inhuman. Critics argue that the government's response demonstrates oppression and calls it question to a commitment to democratic freedom. To do good to all that we have today, joining us virtually is Hassan Soweto. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Hassan.
Yeah, good morning, and thanks for having me.
Thank you. We truly do appreciate you. I will try as much as I can not to be emotional this morning and going by what we saw, the viral videos that are around town. I'll try as much as I can not to be emotional. But Hassan Soweto, in the history of Nigeria, have we ever had it this bad, even coming from military dictatorship? But most importantly, now that we seem to have a democratic process, have we ever had it this bad?
Well, let me start by first saying that you should not be shy from showing your emotion. Actually, what we need in this country today, regarding the show of shame yesterday, is actually an emotional response for all the Nigerian people who still have some conscience. We need to all have a moral outrage to what has happened, because what we have also seen in this country over the years is what I call a desensitization towards government atrocities. You know, there is a feeling that if it has not happened to me, then I don't have to, show any sign of a discomfort by it. But some of us have to show emotion. Some of us have to say that what has happened to another person, then it's actually a threat to all of us. So that I'm not equally as emotional as you are right now. And I know that some of the lawyers in the court yesterday were so traumatized by what happened that some of them may not really be able to walk into a courtroom for a long period of time. Because what happened yesterday was also a desecration, of what you call the allowed chambers, of a court of justice. But what you had were malnourished children who showed visible sign of torture, of maltreatment, and they were deposited right there in the courtroom, and the judge did not have, the confidence, the courage to say that I cannot sit over these people. These people already have been judged violently by the police. They have been maltreated, they have been starved for 93 days, and they are not fit to be tried. That judge sat over them. That judge had their pleas, and that judge asked them to be further remanded till January next year.
Okay, one of the other judges.
In prison custody.
Sorry to cut you short, Soweto. When you give your analysis, kindly add this to it. One of the judges that said they are not minors, that they are actually married with children. So a judge actually stated that.
That was the Federal Government Council. That was the Federal Government Council. And What I will say today is that such a lawyer, the NBA really need to take actions against, lawyers like that. Because what that lawyer said yesterday, it goes beyond the remit, of his brief. Because even though you are a counsel to the federal government, you are meant to still observe some standard of decency. But what he said yesterday, clearly, was a further disparaging of those children. It was clearly lying against them, saying that they are adults, whereas all of us could see very clearly that they were minors, and even in their charge sheet, their ages were listed there. Some of them were as young as 14, some 15, some 16, at least 28 of the 76 were below the age of 18, and that was clearly stated in their charge sheet. So for the counsel to the federal government to then say that they are adults who are married, is a clear indication of how, very terrible, some professionals have become in the service of their stomach in this country, and we must all condemn it.
Thank you.
Now, to the question as to whether this has ever happened before, well, I think that we have to be clear that there is hardly any atrocity of governance that we have in this country today that is not a repeat of history. Don't forget that, just back there in 1995, even though these are not children, but you had, the environmental activists like the Ogboni 9, killed, executed by the Sani Abacha government simply because they were fighting, for environmental justice, for resource control. We have had, for instance, student activists, who often back then in the 80s and 90s were as young as 20, 21, being thrown to jail, being killed, simply because they were, fighting against the commercialization of education. So in that sense, what I'm trying to say therefore is that, what we are seeing is just a repeat of a pattern of oppression that has defined capitalist governance in this country for decades. But there's a way that all of us must say that what is happening today has obviously never happened in the last 24 years. Because since 1999, when Nigeria became a democratic country, as it's called, there has been certain expectation of governance because of the existence of a constitution, which also defines the principles of engagement between a government and its citizens. And that constitution specifies the right of citizens very clearly, but also specifies the right of children and how they ought to be treated. Children are not supposed to be held before an adult court. Children are not supposed to be displayed in the manner they have been displayed, even if those children are found to have committed any crime whatsoever. So that my argument is not to say that children do not and cannot commit crime, but that even when that happens, they are in the constitution of the federation, there are clear provisions under the child right law. There are clear provisions under the international statute that protect the right of children, which Nigeria is signatory to, that specifies how children who may have even committed any misdemeanor should be handled. They are not supposed to be taken to an adult court. They are not supposed to be detained in adult custodial centers. They are not supposed even to be tried publicly, because there's also the question of how not to ensure that that trial, the criminal justice system will affect their future. But what happened yesterday was a complete violation of all of those principles of engagement when it comes to how children who are caught up in the criminal justice system should be treated. So on all fronts, what happened yesterday, was an assault on all moral decency. It was a violation of all known laws and conventions and statutes for dealing with children. And it shows that how the Nigerian government, especially the Tinubu government, has fallen so low. It now shows that this government, is so fearful of its citizens that it is not afraid of little children, because what those children are being charged with is not even crimes of stealing. What they are being charged with is treason. They are being charged with terrorism. children are being said, to be out there to remove a sitting government. How more paranoid can the government be? And we all have to condemn all of this.
Okay, thank you so much, Soweto. Now, at this point, a lot of Nigerians are asking, because it's as though democracy is on trial. Can we categorically say democracy exists in our country, Nigeria, looking at this current situation?
Definitely, we can almost say that any iota of democracy still exists in this country at this moment. In fact, what we have going on right now is an evolution of what I have been calling a civilian capitalist dictatorship under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Because what it means is that the government is not even respecting its own laws. The government is not observing the provisions of its own constitution. The government is serially violating conventions and statutes, international conventions and statutes that it is signatory to. The government is not even worried about the image of the country in terms of how it deals with protesters, peaceful protesters, in terms of how it deals with children. Because what we are talking about today is not even the fact that people have committed any crimes. It is the fact that the peaceful protesters who marched to the street in August about the condition of hardship and hunger in this country are now being criminalized. Their action is being criminalized. They are being tried for treason for daring to complain about a situation of hunger and hardship. Beyond the 140 people who were put to trial, who were arraigned yesterday, 11 people are also coming to court next week Friday. That is, Adaramoye, Michael Lenny, and 10 others. They were arraigned back then, in September, and they have been given bail on September 11. They are returning to court next week Friday, when their trial for treason is going to commence. So what that means, therefore, is that this government, has not just charged these people to court with the intention to just frighten them and intimidate them, and then maybe forget about the case. The government is intent on trying all of these people one by one for treason. And what this means is that if they are found guilty, something is not impossible considering how the judiciary has never become pliable to the executive. If they are found guilty, according to Nigeria's law, treason carries a death penalty. And that is why I liken what is happening right now to what happened in 1996 under the President Abacha regime, where Sauriyo and Aduguni 9 were actually executed in this country because they were fighting against governmental justice. In a way, it seems that history has turned a full circle for us, and now we have right now in our hands the prospects that the Nigerians, young people, including children, who simply went out to protest peacefully, may actually be found guilty of treason. And then what happens next? Will they be killed? Will the death penalty be the sentence? That is what we are facing in this country today. And that is why we all have to rise up. And that is why it can no more be described as a democracy. Because protest itself, dissent, disagreement with government, engagement over government policies are supposed to be integral part of any democracy. Democracy affords the citizens the right not just to elect their government, but also to hold those government accountable. So where an elected government, turns itself to an emperor over its own without them to ask questions, but now punishes them for doing so, that can no more be called a democracy.
Very, very true. Hassan Soweto, at the very beginning, I said that I try as much as I can not to be emotional because what the news is so sad. And as much as Nigerians would love to, love the administration of Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the more he makes it extremely difficult for people to do so. Ironically, don't you think Bola Ahmed Tinubu is gradually building a legacy, a very bad legacy for himself that would be remembered in the future and used against him? Now, I'd love for you to answer this with respect to, during the days of Nadeko, the Radio Kudirat, a clandestine pro-democracy and anti-bad governance radio station by United Democratic Front of Nigeria, that's the UDFN, was created to fight bad governance at the time of Sani Abacha. Nadeko, a pro-democracy group and also an anti-bad governance group, which Bola Ahmed Tinubu himself was a chieftain, was proscribed. Don't you think it's so sad that the same man who had been at the forefront of of working against bad governance is himself a culprit and making himself a very, creating the institution that he has once kicked against.
Yeah, it is very sad, as he said, and I completely also agree with you that Bola Ahmed Tinubu is going to leave a very terrible legacy, a legacy of wanton destruction of citizens' rights, a legacy of hunger and hardship, and a legacy of intolerance for dissent. But then it also needs to be said that none of what Bola Ahmed Tinubu is doing today is also surprising, because we are all students of history. And when we read history through the class lens, then we understand the actions of people right there, even in the past. Yes, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, alongside many of those who have been in government since 1999, did play roles in the anti-military struggle back then in the 90s. But from what point of view were they playing those roles? Because don't forget that the anti-military struggle had all kinds of colorations and layers involved in it. There was the students, the workers, the ordinary Nigerians and activists who are truly fighting, for a new democracy, Nigeria that would usher in a true democratic period that would ensure that the wealth of this country goes to benefit the poor of this country. But there was also the bandwagons of politicians who were, chased out of power by liberty, who became agents on the pro-democratic struggle. They're in order just to win back their place in government. And I think that if we are going to have a correct historical evaluation, the roles of the likes of Bola Ahmed Tinubu and co, then we should be very clear that they were simply in those struggles in order to have their place back in power. I mean, and that explains why it should not surprise anyone that since 1999, all of those people, as soon as they got to power, simply, began to reenact the same anti-poor policies and also, of course, the same dictatorial measures and repression that the military also implemented while in power. I think this point is very, very important. Otherwise, we are going to think that every change maker will turn out to be Bola Tinubu in future. The reality is that all of these people were in those struggles only because they needed to get back, to power. But then it is correct to say that if Bola Tinubu is trying protesters today simply for carrying placards, then it means that his own actions while during the anti-military struggle ought to mean that they should not even be qualified, to be a president today. Because if you have been charged for treason, if you have committed treasonable offense, in terms of having, a guerrilla radio which was broadcasting to Nigeria in order to change a government, then you have also committed treason. And from that point of view, you are simply accusing people today, for committing lesser crimes than what you committed, years ago. So that's a very important argument, and it's to show how this charge of treason really is simply just a false political charge against people who are trying to correct a status quo. Former President Buhari himself, was a coup plotter, and yet he became a democratic president. Yeah. Former President Obasanjo was a coup plotter, and yet he became a democratic president. So what all of this means, therefore, is that for those who are committing these crimes against the Nigerian people today, they need to know that the time will come when they'll be out of power, and then their actions obviously will also be subjected, to the court of public opinion, to the people's justice system, and at that point, the history will not be kind to them. I think that point needs to be spelled out, very, very clearly.
Okay, thank you, Soweto. Now, add this to your parting shot, please. What would be your advice to this present administration, to the president and the judges and courts who are actually handling this particular case? The best technique to use.
It's important to call on the Chief Justice of the Federation right now, because calling on the Attorney General is completely pointless. But the Chief Justice of the Federation, as the head of judges in this country, has a duty, to protect the judiciary, to caution judges, to ensure that the judiciary does not become a pliant tool for President Bola Tinubu to continue to repress the rights of Nigerians. Judges must have the courage to be able to reject any case that would tarnish the image of the court. The NBA also needs to caution lawyers, knowing to ensure that lawyers do not, conduct themselves in such a way as to become pliant tool in the hands of the state. But then I think we also need to say that the media, NGOs, civil sector organizations, we all need to be up and doing right now, because it's becoming very clear that the government really has become a rampaging, monster that is prepared to continue to attack the right of everyone. There is actually no new law that this government cannot plunge into. And that is why what happened yesterday ought to cause a global moral outrage that should get all of us out to the street to begin to say enough is enough. Enough is enough. What happened yesterday is equal to the kind of situation that led to the moral outrage, that led to the Bring Back Our Girls campaign few years ago. Because that was also the maltreatment of children, that led to that. And what happened yesterday was a sitting government actually kidnapping children and holding them before a court to be tried for terrorism and treason. We all need to stand up right now and say enough is enough.
Thank you so very much. This is happening, unfortunately, at a time when Nigeria is asking for a seat at the UN Security Council, and I wonder how the world would see us at this point, especially maltreating minors, children that should be in school, children that should be spearheaded, towards creating a better Nigeria for all of us. That is so very unfortunate, but that is the situation we found ourselves, unfortunately, in Nigeria. Thank you so very much, Hassan Soweto, for being part of our show today. We truly do appreciate you.
My pleasure.
Thank you so very much. All right, that's just about the time we have. It's so sad that we have to go, go like this on a sad note, but that is the situation we found ourselves. But please do well to visit us. You can always see us at enterprisetvnews.com. You may like, comment, and follow us on all our social media platforms at Enterprise TV 7. I am Henry Igwebike.
And I'm Choma Okoye.
Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye.